We're coming up on a landscape bed that's been a work in progress for about a year now, and that's something that I'll oftentimes do. I'll start a bed and I'll wait to put the plants in. We're going to go ahead and go through some of the quick steps, how this came together. I got the edging in with that fieldstone rock you see, and then I just added plants throughout the season. And that's something I often recommend to people. Depending on your situation, you don't always have to finish your little landscape project at the same time. Since I consider myself more of a plant collector, I oftentimes will do that. I'll create a bed. I'll do it with the purpose that as I come across plants at garden centers, maybe a gift from a friend, that's when we start adding the plants. So real quick, some of the steps as we put this together. You'll notice where we dug out this trench here and put that rock in for our edging. I just throw that up on a pile and we'll just create a berm with it. I always like to use contouring in the landscape. And then most of the time I'll bring in additional soil to make that contour more of a smooth, gradual transition. If you subscribe, I've got a couple other videos where we show that process of putting in this fieldstone edging. You can page back, find that video. Let's start by taking a look at some of the fieldstone that was hand-picked out of western North Dakota. It's got this lichen on it. And here's what we're talking about with those lichens. They present a lot of different color variations, and they just add something real special to the whole project. Lichens are a complex life form that's a symbiotic relationship between a fungus and an algae. There's over 3,000 species, and they're fascinating to read about. Now, my days of hand-picking rock, I think, are mostly over. Usually I'll have the rock delivered. And I estimate, with all the different beds I've put in over the years here, between soil and the different rock and fieldstone, we've probably brought in about 200 tons of material. This little tractor you see here off in the distance, let me tell you, you can do a lot of work with a small little front-end loader like that. Just no way I could have done it without that little tractor. So all in all, it's actually a pretty simple process that I use to put in little beds like this. I like curves in the landscape. I'm not a real big square corner person. I'll lay out that garden hose and I'll see if I like the pattern I've created, dig that trench, throw that sod scrap up into the middle, cover it with some topsoil, and man, you're ready to go ahead and start planting. If you look here, I often also, a lot of times I'll use mulch, or make sure you create some kind of divider that keeps that mulch from floating into the rocks. Just it's a more clean look. I also have mentioned over the videos that I don't use poly or fabric. That allows plants to naturalize a little bit better. I don't see the expense is worth it. I just stay on top of the weeds. We're going to add 2 more plants in just a little bit, a peony and one of the false indigos. But first, let's take a look at what we've planted throughout the summer. This is one of the taller Rudbeckia varieties, the herbstone or the herbston variety. This is probably going to spread out a little bit here, and we might have to contain it before you plant some of these taller perennials. Make sure you know that high winds can really destroy how they look. This is a Heliopsis variety that has similar characteristics to the Rudbeckia. Look at that. What a mess. And next to that Rudbeckia here, we've got a columnar aspen. This is Mount Sentinel columnar aspen. Fast growers, but create that columnar accent in the landscape. Take a look at this Swedish aspen that I planted about 15 years ago from a little 6-footer. That thing's towered now to 35, 40, I don't know, is it more than 40 feet now? But just what a statement those columnar plants make in the landscape. And here we've got Summer Swan Swang. And here's when we came across Summer Swan Song ironweed. Now, I've got that in a pretty tight location. I came across this bigger one at the Arboretum in Minnesota, the University of Minnesota Arboretum. So I'm a little nervous. That one's going to get pretty tight in there, but we're going to leave it. We'll see what happens. Looks like we're going to get a nice late season flower coming out of there. That's a new one to me, so I'm excited to see that bloom. And then over here, we've got a smaller, low-growing plant. This is prairie smoke, one of the Goom, I believe it's pronounced. That's the Latin genus. Here we've got a Culver's root. That's going to get some size to it as well. And a nice pollinator attractor. In fact, all of them that we've looked at so far are great for pollinating. Then tucked down here, this is one of the false indigos, that blue false indigo, considered a native in our area, the upper Midwest, Northern Plains. Just a beautiful, showy flower in the spring. And right next to our false indigo that we put in, we've got Samantha Rose Lily. It's a lily, gets pretty tall. This is done blooming now, but look at these blooms that we had earlier in the year. And if you want fragrance on a lily, whoo, you just walk by this area and the perfume was just out of this world on this plant. And the plant that's been in this little area the longest is this oak leaf mountain ash. The deer are attracted to it, and you can see that we do have some damage here from rubbing on it. The other thing about oak leaf mountain ash, they are susceptible to fire blight, which is a bacteria. So try to avoid pruning anytime during the active growing season. That bacteria will be on insects and they'll be attracted to that pruning cut, and that's how fire blight typically gets its start. And this mountain ash, you can see it gets its name, oak leaf, because that leaf does resemble some of the oak leaves with that lobing like that. Okay, yeah, time to get to work here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to put that Baptista right there. That's going to have a gorgeous yellow flower. All right, we are first part of September here. Fall's a great time to plant. The soil temperatures are going to be warm for you, so a plant's going to root in quickly. We'll start by moving this rock out of the way. I don't mind planting in rock, but my wife hates it. And that's one of the reasons I like to put in mulch beds. It does make it a little bit easier to add plants, take them out, maybe add some annuals for probably about 4 weeks before we get a real good killing. Hard frost, maybe 6 weeks. And the variety we're going to put on this, it's honey roasted false indigo, shooting for about a 3-foot height here. It's going to bloom earlier than this rudbeckia we looked at. That's something you can do with perennials. Always be looking for having bloom throughout the season. That's one of the great things about having a lot of different plants planted. In the nursery standard, this is considered a number 2 pot. What you get here is you get a more expensive plant because it's bigger, but with that bigger root system, you're probably going to get it to establish, have a larger plant more quickly. We'll go ahead and we'll add some water before we put the rock back, make sure we've got that right depth, and we'll work on our peony planting. All right, the peony we're going to add in this location, Carl Rosenfield, just a beautiful deep red. Now, if you're familiar with peonies, they are one of the biggest showstoppers as far as size of bloom in the spring. Just an incredible plant. They do have the tendency to eventually drape down because of the weight of that flower. We've got a lot of space in this area, 4 feet by 4 feet. This is also a good time of year, first part of September, 4 or so weeks before that frost comes in, that you can divide peony bulbs if they've gotten really large. That's gonna look nice there. Look at that, that's a nice fall color on this peony as well. Look at that, that's something that we don't ever talk about sometimes on different perennials. We're always talking about the flower or if they're a pollinator. And we'll go ahead and we'll get that rock moved back. Doesn't have to be very thick. Should we give those new stems next spring a chance to break through there. Thanks for stopping by Garden Hike, letting me share some of my new plants and project with you. We'll see you again soon, next video.